Well, we've just had today and confirmed to you this morning a new target for Labor. That's a 2030 emissions reduction target. We know this has been a big part of the last election. Will it be this time around? Joining me live now is Resources Minister Keith Pitt for more on this. So thanks for your time, Minister. The target's 43%. What's happening this time around is Labor's doing it in a more methodical way. They're banking your projection, the upper end of that at 35%, adding policies and then getting to 43. So what do you make of this new methodology from Labor?
Tom, great with your viewers. I haven't seen the detail yet. I don't expect we'll see a lot of detail out of Anthony Albanese. Mate, sounds like he drew a number out of a barrel to me. I mean, seriously, you've got Joel Fitzgibbon on one end saying they should match the government, and you've got Adam Band on the other end of the Labor Green Alliance saying that it should be 70 plus, and I think they've just tried to land somewhere in the middle. I'm not sure there'll be a lot of science behind it, but I look forward to seeing how they expect to achieve that and what the potential cost is for Australia. I mean, and we've got to keep in mind, Tom, that our emissions are already down 20%.
Sure, and that's why Labor's perhaps able to have more confidence this time around. Last time when they had the 26 to 28% your target, now your projection's at 35. So you can't argue against the 35. It's the extra 8% that's up for debate here. Labor says it will have its policies. Each one of those policies will, in total, add up to 8%. Isn't that a solid methodology? What's wrong with that?
Well, once again, it's all about the detail. So our emissions are down 20%. We're doing better than South Korea, Japan, and a range of others. So we're actually delivering on what we said we would do. Now, our public stated position is out there for everyone to see, Tom. It's been put forward, and we've got to keep in mind that it's not zero. It's a net zero commitment. And I look forward to seing exactly what Mr Albanese intends to do.
So you will wait to see the detail.
A very small target
you're
approach.
open-minded on that aspect of it, will you? Because that does matter. I mean, firm agreement there, but this is their methodology. So if you see the detail of this policy, then you'll assess it. You're not necessarily saying it's junk right now.
Oh, I always try and take the detail in, Tom, to see exactly what people are proposing. But what you can be sure of with the Labor Party is it'll cost more money. It'll most definitely involve taxes. It'll increase the cost for Australians and increase cost of living because that's their form. That's what they've done every time they've been in government.
What about one of the policies we do know about, $20 billion to rewire the grid? Now, this will allow more renewables to be in the grid while keeping it stable. It sounds right up your alley, Keith Pitt.
Well, I think he's got some zeros missing. It's a very substantial asset. And what exactly is Mr Albanese talking about? Because there's a lot more than just the transmission network. There's also the distribution network. And from an engineering and design viewpoint, Tom, it's one of the biggest pieces of infrastructure in the country that's developed over many, many decades, depending, of course, on where people live and where they move to and what towns grow and in what direction. It's incredibly challenging to be able to design this into the future. So I think it's just another Labor throwaway line. And once again, Mr Albanese is trying to keep himself a small target. He doesn't want to put forward exactly what their policies will cost, but you can be sure it'll be more taxes.
Well, he's putting forward what it'll cost. He says it'll cost $20 billion. I'm not sure what you mean by not wanting to put it forward.
Well, I don't think that will be anywhere near enough for what they are proposing.
You're saying that, but you said it wasn't enough, but then you said he didn't want to put the cost forward. He has put the cost forward. You can debate what it is, but he is putting forward the cost.
Well, Tom, what I'm saying is that is a capped number, which in my view won't match up to what Labor's commitments will be. They never do.
Okay, is it a good project, rewiring the grid? Because if our main sources of energy are changing, it makes sense that we'll need a modern grid. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think we've got a modern grid now, Tom. I think we've had one which has been incredibly reliable. It has been in the best interest of our nation to maintain it at the level that it's been at. There's been some challenges in some locations, in particular Queensland, because it's run by the Labor state government. But once again, it's about ensuring that we have an affordable, reliable supply of energy for all Australians and in particular industry.
But if the current grid and distribution network, is that fit for purpose if we do go up towards 90% plus of renewable energy?
Well, it depends on what you're intending to put into the network, Tom. If you're talking about every rooftop having solar that drives through the distribution network, well, I don't think it's worth a threepence. It's nowhere near what would be required to be expended. But once again, I come back to what we're doing. We are delivering on our commitments. We've reduced emissions by 20%. Labor will once again tax people more, charge people more, increase the cost of living, because that's exactly what their history says they do every single time they get into government.
So but just on the grid, you really don't think we need to modernise it between now and 2050?
Well, that's not what I've said. I mean, the grid expands on demand, and where need is, it's done.
Yeah, but not just expand, but it's going to need a very different approach, right? Going away from these big central parts of electricity with traditional power plants and the more renewables. You know, the more you spread out where they are across the country, as you like to talk about, the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining. The more spread out those elements are, the more likely they will be. The sun's shining somewhere, or there's wind blowing somewhere. So isn't that the point around modernising the grid?
Well, as I've said, I mean, and I've said this before, these things are about physics and engineering and design. And I think Mr Albanese's plucked a number out of the sky to make himself feel good. That's the absolute reality. If you go and look at the cost of building transmission networks at the moment, I think you can see very clearly what those costs will be into the future. And it doesn't look anywhere near what would be what would be required.
Okay, but I'm just asking you, do you think the grid needs
network,
modernising between now and 2050? That major project you're talking about, you say it's a big project, someone has to undergo it, don't they? Whether it's Labor or the Coalition, it needs to happen.
Yeah, but it's all about demand, and these things are generally run by the states, depending on which part of the country you're in. And the distribution network is the biggest part of this, Tom. The piece that goes into every single house right across the country for 25 million people is an enormous piece of infrastructure that's been developed over many decades. If you expect that you can replace the whole lot in a term of government, well, I just think that's an incredible thing to put forward as a proposition.
The whole lot. I'm not quite sure that's representing the policy correctly, replacing the whole lot. Anyway, look, we'll talk when there's some more detail on that, Keith Pitt, because we're both stabbing in the dark a little bit on this. Just finally wanted to ask you about the National Integrity Commission. This was a pledge made by the government last time. It would be in this term. Now you might not even introduce it. Why would you not introduce the legislation into Parliament?
Oh, we've been very consistent on our position, Tom, and quite simply, Labor's not supporting it. I mean, we want to ensure that we put forward our plan for the Integrity Commission. We want to ensure that the plan put forward is not one which allows for spurious complaints, as we've seen in other locations. And we want to ensure, once again, that it passes through the Parliament with bipartisan support. Now, we're not seeing that from the Labor Party. We're not seeing their support.
Can you name another bill that you didn't even introduce because Labor wouldn't support it?
Well, Tom, this is about ensuring that we have an outcome which is the right outcome. Now, Mr Albanese is always all about the politics. Can you name a bill
he
is never about
you haven't
the policy.
Introduced, you won't even introduce because Labor won't support it?
Tom, there's any number of bills that are on the list at any one time that have been introduced into the Parliament that haven't been put through the process, depending on timing and availability and priorities.
Yeah, but I'm just asking if you've ever given as the chief reason to not introduce something because Labor won't support it. Is there another bill you can name?
Well, I think we want to ensure that we are, firstly, successful in having this pass both the House and the Senate. We don't control the Senate. I think that's pretty obvious. And once again, it's about getting the right outcome. Now, Mr Albanese wants to throw darts, he wants to throw mud, but he never wants to actually focus on the policy itself to get the outcome that the Australian people need.
All right, still not sure there's a bill that fits that description, but happy to be corrected later on. Minister, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you.
Hey, great to be with you. Hey, one quick one. Shout out to Damien Drummond, who's announced his retirement today. 20 years of service in state and federal parliaments. I think that's a wonderful innings.
Yeah, he's a pretty popular figure here in the Parliament as well. So, yeah, best wishes to Damien Drummond. Keith Pitt, thank you.